You're listening to Creative Campfire, where creatives like you come to talk shop, share stories, and light the path for one another. Whether you're here to learn, grow, or just feel a little less alone, welcome to the fire. All right, everyone, I am so excited to pull up a chair at this amazing campfire because it feels like I should be in Colorado with my friend Ryan, because that's where you have campfires. It's definitely in Colorado, in the mountains, somewhere beautiful. And he'd be shooting some amazing campaign of people running around in cool gear, like doing, I don't know, an ultra marathon or something across like the Rockies. But I'm so excited to have my friend Ryan Dearth here. We met ages ago at a portfolio review in New York, and we've kept in touch all this time. And we were just chatting before we hit record about how long has it been since we've actually looked at each other's faces and not just like DM'd each other on Instagram. And I think Ryan said it's been like 4 years, which is wild. So welcome, Ryan. So excited to have you here.
Thanks, Shelly. I'm really excited to be here. It's nice to see your face.
It's nice to see your face too. When we met all those years ago, you were in a very different place with your photography. You were travel and heavy editorial, and doing kind of a smattering of things. And so rewind back to how you got into photography and kind of the winding path that's got you to today.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And it's kind of crazy. I've been doing this full time for 15 years. And I think back when I very first started and quit my job, um, I was 25 and I had no idea about the world of photography. And I was just sort of like, if I don't do it now, I'm never gonna do it. And I took the leap, and I like look back at that and I'm like, I was insane to do that. But I gotta give myself a little bit of credit because I think that there was truth to like if I didn't do it then, I probably never would have.
What do you think gave you the courage to like take the jump?
I'll give you some background. I grew up in a military family. We moved around a lot, and you're in London now, but you might not know this. I lived in London when we moved there when I was 12, and I was there until I was about 15. And my dad was an amateur photographer in the Navy, and so he was always taking photos. And he handed me his old 1970s Pentax K1000 when I was probably like 10 years old, and taught me how to use it and like just the basics around stuff. And I loved it. And I took a couple classes in high school. I took some classes in high school and fell in love with it and thought about going to photo school, but that didn't end up working out. But I kept the interest, and I took an internship with a photographer in New York when I was in college, just
Oh,
because I was like, I don't know. I don't know any professional photographers. I don't know how this works. And I was really inspired by it. And so I moved to New York and took an unpaid internship and spent my life savings. And I lived in Bushwick before it was like cool, hip
cool.
Bushwick. And I rode the train for an hour and a half every day each way to get to the Upper East Side to work for this
Oh
guy.
my gosh.
And it's really funny because I showed up and he was like an old report, like a news photographer, an editorial photographer, and he was transitioning into more commercial space, but it was like the deadest summer for him. So we spent a lot of time like archiving his photos and playing video games,
That sounds
which was really funny
fun.
and interesting. But I learned a ton that summer, and I left New York City being like, "Oh yeah, this is what I want to do," which was really cool. I also learned in that time that like I need a portfolio and real
Mm.
equipment and a little bit of, knowledge and all of these things that I didn't have. And so luckily I had been studying physics. And so I got a corporate job that I got offered a job out of college, to stay. I was in Boulder and got a job in Denver. And I was like, okay, I kind of thought maybe I'd move to New York and become a photographer,
But Denver it is.
but I can't live in New York. I know how expensive that is, and I have no money, no experience, no portfolio, no equipment. So I guess I better go make some money and build those things out. And so I did that, and I literally thought to myself, like, okay, I'm gonna give myself 2 years, and if I love this job, if I love my life, like that's the point, right? Photography is a dream and that's great, but like if I'm happy, that's probably the better thing. So I gave myself 2 years to make money and build on all those things. And um and at 2 years I kind of looked at everything and was banging, basically was like, nope, I have to get out of here. I'm banging my head against the wall here every single day. Um, and to answer your question about what gave me the courage, I don't know that it was really the courage. It was more like the opposite fear. And I had a supervisor, a manager who was like 10 years older than me. And he was really great. We got to know each other pretty well. And he was an amateur photographer and a musician, and he had all these cool things going on, and he'd been working at this job for 12 years
Oh,
and
wow.
had a wife and 2 kids and a mortgage payment and 2 cars and all of this stuff. And this job just like it was not fulfilling for anyone who did it.
Yeah, it was life sucking.
Yeah, it was life sucking, and I could see the life, it was like, oh, you used to be so full of life. And he was still a great guy, but it was like, if I do this for 10 more years, I'm going to be in exactly your spot.
Yeah, I'm going to be an
And so
empty vessel.
exactly. It was like, oh, I can see the trajectory I'm on, and I don't like I got to get off this ride now. Um, and so I quit. I actually like transitioned into a slightly different role that would give me a little more opportunity to travel and make some more money for about 9 or 10 months. Because I was just like, oh, I need that piece of gear. I need that hard drive. I need these things to launch my, what I thought was going to be this incredibly successful career immediately. But yeah, I quit my job, and that was in 2010. So
Oh,
this
wow.
is
Okay.
December, it was December of 2010. So I'm coming up on 15 years.
Amazing. I mean, I think one is that the insight to be like, okay, I'm going to give this time and maybe this is my path. And I kind of giggled when you were like, and thankfully I was studying physics. I was like, yeah, I would never want to be studying physics. So good on you. That one. Um, but two, like just the insight to be like, oh, okay, I'm coming up on those 2 years and this is not the path. This is not what's
Mhm.
making me happy. This is the time for me to make a change. And
Mhm.
you're very, I will say, like, kudos to you, very practical to be like, okay, well, can I move in a direction that's going to support the things that I want to kind of ramp up, right?
Mhm.
Like you were talking about the gear and the different things that you might need and just like the money savings, right? To like give yourself a launch pad.
Mhm. Mhm.
So to have the wherewithal to be like, oh, I want to be able to move around or have more travel. Um, like I don't know if a lot of people are just unhappy and they're like, I need a change and like I'm gonna quit.
Right.
So
Yeah, I've always been reasonably practical, which has served me well. It takes me a really long time to make decisions, especially big decisions. Partly because of that, because it's like I have to think through all of those things, and then I also, and I don't think I understood this at the time, but I have, like I am kind of a deep feeler, and I have to give myself time to sort of feel and listen to the intuition and let that sort of like come to the surface over the surface level anxiety things, the knee-jerk reactions that are like, you got to get out of here right now, you got to do this. And so sometimes I will have to sort of like sit on something for a few days, and it's really uncomfortable for me when somebody says make a decision right now.
and you're
for,
like,
for something that
can I
feels
have
like it.
72 hours?
Yeah, for something that feels like it's going to have a long lasting effect. I'm like, if this is going to last 10 years, I better take a day,
At least,
or
right?
three.
Yeah,
But it doesn't always work. Timing doesn't always work at that speed.
that's true. So then if you were in this kind of transition period for 10 months and you kind of alluded, you gave us a little foreshadowing, right? That you thought your
Mm.
career was just going to take off. What did you learn, or what was your next step to like actually make that a reality, make the idea of the career the career?
Yeah, so during that, almost 3 years, and especially that like 9 or 10 months of transition, I was shooting the whole time and kind of building portfolio, but I didn't know who I was as a photographer. I'm sure most of us have been through
I
that.
don't think I know who I am today as a photographer.
Yeah, I mean, like I love this conversation because it's such an evolution, and I know so much better who I am now. And every year it's different. And every year I'm like, there's always some piece of doubt that's like, who am I? What does my photography say? What am I interested in? What am I chasing? Does this feel right? And the answers are never that clear. Um,
Yeah.
and I've
I
been
wonder if
dealing with
that's what
that.
drove you to editorial. I mean, in a way, right?
Yeah, so well, I interned with that guy who is a newspaper photographer. He won the Pulitzer
Right.
Prize with the Times. So like I'd always had, also like I have a degree in physics. I'm very rooted in trying to understand the world around me. And so I think that like again, it took me a long time to figure out like why am I interested in physics and in photography and in journalism. And I love the sort of like observational qualities around journalism and editorial photography. And so during that 10-month period, I started going to New York and assisting this like very talented wedding photographer.
Hmm,
And so I'd
that's
second
okay.
shoot for him. And part of that was this practicality that was like, I have to find a way to make money, And I knew that jumping into newspaper. Well, first of all, this was 2010, and the like whole newspaper business had crumbled in 2008 and 2009, and the market was flooded with amazing photojournalists. And so it was like really hard and really scary to get into that world. And so, yeah, it was kind of like, okay, I know I'm not going to just jump straight into that. I had a little bit of experience with newspapers, but nobody was going to just hand me a job. And
Right.
I was sort of like, I don't think I can go back and do like an internship, do the whole thing. And so I started second shooting for this guy in New York, and then second shooting for a couple great wedding photographers here in Colorado, and just sort of like built that experience up. And then I got as we do as photographers, people give it, our friends give us jobs. It's like, hey, we don't have very much money. Can you shoot our wedding? Like, sure. And so, I'd done that and I built a portfolio, and it was good enough to put out there and start getting work, which was great. So I'd never started a business. I didn't really know how any of that worked. So I was flying by the seat of my pants, shooting weddings and second shooting. And then after a little while, I started assisting commercially and stuff like that. And I mean, weddings was really my career, my moneymaker for 6 or 7 years. And I feel like I was a really good wedding photographer. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
wedding,
weddings also like it's like wedding is its own, it's like its own masterclass, its own education, right? Like
oh
shooting
man,
weddings and getting to shoot weddings and understanding flow and timing and people's personalities and the details and
yeah,
shooting like every genre of photography within that one day. You know, you have fashion and you have
yeah,
editorial and you have family portraits and then you have product photography and you're
yep,
shooting event photography.
documentary, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fast. You got to get good shots, and it's like you can take 15 seconds to get this thing right?
Yeah. And it's not going to happen again.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So the time pressure is really, really there. And I do find that for the folks that I know that have done the wedding path because I was a second shooter for a long time myself with a number of photographers in the Bay
Okay.
Area. I think it like you quickly figure out like, oh, I like shooting that. Would I like to shoot more of that like one sliver of thing?
Hmm.
Um, like for me, it was like I really loved photographing like the lifestyle moments, the in between moments of the portraits of like the families and the kids. And I was like, oh, I want to shoot more kids. This is really
Mm,
fun. I like the personality of the kids, and this is really cool. And I actually didn't really enjoy leading as a wedding photographer. So I would second shoot
mm.
and then do the family portrait stuff
Oh.
before I got into food because I got known to be like the detail girl. Oh, you'll go shoot all the details and you do great details.
Nice.
Right. And so I think it's like that path where you start to figure out like, oh, I gravitate to this, or I like to be like the voyeur photographer, right? The step back and get the like the shoot throughs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that opens up people's eyes and style for them and kind of answers some of those questions to maybe what is next.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Where were we?
6 years of weddings trained
Six
you
years. Oh yeah.
to do the next
Well,
thing.
yeah, and you kind of touched on this, right? This idea of like, is that what do I want to shoot more of? And I think one year I shot 25 weddings in a year,
Ooh,
and I was like, and one of them was a 4-day Indian wedding, and it was just like at the end of that season, I was like, I don't want to go to a wedding for 10 years. Like I'm so over being, but it was like so much fun. I loved being a wedding photographer. It was a great time in my life. Especially in my 20s, just like showing up to these like good vibe things and
yeah.
having a blast and
And
just
you
sort
just
of
know
like
every night's going to end
em-
with a dance. So,
exactly, and embedding yourself in this like culture of good times and celebration. It was really fun. Um, but I kind of just burned out really hard on weddings, and at some point it just kind of felt like I fell into a rut, and I felt like I'm telling the same story and the same way, and all of these things. And so at some point, yeah, I shot those 25 weddings or so, and I was like, okay, I think this is my chance. This is the universe telling me that it's time to not move on from weddings because that was my whole business, but make a real effort to branch out and do other things. And so I pushed really hard into editorial. And
okay.
I was a documentary wedding photographer. And so I had a lot of like doc work and editorial work within that, like you said. And yeah, I pushed into editorial and did a lot of portraits, and that was one of the my favorite things in weddings was shooting kind of editorial portraits and editorial fashion stuff, um and I don't know, I think that's well, I'll keep going, but yeah, I moved into editorial and I was working a lot for Eater.
Oh,
um
yeah. Eater.com.
yeah, eater.com, and Denver's food scene was really burgeoning, and there was all of these like new restaurant openings, and so I kind of became the go-to eater photographer. And they used to pay me $50. Actually, they used to pay me $25 an assignment, which
I was going
sounds
to ask because
horrific.
it is horrific. And they
It
still
is
pay probably
horrific.
about the same amount of money today.
Yeah, probably. So it went from 25 to 50, and I was shooting like one or two restaurants a week for them. But it is really horrible, but at least with restaurants, there was something where I would go into a restaurant and I would shoot it. And this happened the very first time I went and shot a restaurant, and it got published on Eater. And 2 days later, I got an email from the PR person from the restaurant that was like, "Hey, can we buy these photos?" I
Oh,
was
so
like,
there was a
"Oh,
little bit of a
great."
back end pickup.
Exactly. And so that's what I ended up figuring out with the Eater stuff is like, oh, you can actually make decent money. You can make, 500 to $1,000 with every, 2 out of 3 or,
Yeah.
one out of 2 or 1 out of 3 restaurants would come back and either buy the photos or they'd hire you to shoot something for them.
That's a pretty good return. I mean, 25 to 30% return.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Considering like the upfront is not. right? Where you're like, okay,
Right.
I'm getting $50, which barely covers my gas and parking.
Right.
And then I'm going to go shoot this assignment. But if it's opening doors, the intangible is there.
Hmm. And at that point, I just like I desperately needed experience, and so I was still shooting weddings and paying the bills that way, and I'd pick up, like headshots or whatever. I was doing anything and everything, and I was just saying yes. Which, there's so much advice in the industry that's like you can't always say yes. You have to say no, and I 100% agree with that, and I think that's how you burn out. And also, sometimes you got to say yes because you need that money. You
Well,
need,
I
like you got to keep that thing
yeah,
rolling. And
but I
also,
think to
you
your
never know
point
what
is
you're
like
like. This is early. This is early, right?
right. I mean, I think to your point of like you also knew it was time to push out of the weddings,
Right.
and you were trying to figure out like, okay, well, what does that look like? Like, I don't know that path. I don't know how to connect to X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't have connections there yet.
Right.
So,
Right.
like to your point of like, I'm gonna say yes because it may open that door and it's gonna give me a connection in the restaurant world, for instance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I do think that there is a period of shift, whether you're early in your career or you're in those pivot points, right? You're trying to pivot
Absolutely.
from weddings to something else. Like you kind of have to say yes to the various opportunities. Like, I mean, I moved to a whole new country and I'm like, I don't know anybody here and I have no new connect. Like I have to make those new connections. So there is a lot of saying yes and showing up, and maybe it feels grossly underpaid, but you're like, okay, but I know that there is a potential opportunity, right? There's that 30% chance that there's going to be an opportunity on the other side of that. Not that I
Right.
go thinking those things because I don't, but I think there is,
No, but I think you do have to go into it thinking, especially if it's like a pivot point or something like that. My brother always says, price the work that you don't want really high and discount the work that you do want heavily because that's, like you need work that you can show that's in the space that you want to be. And so it's
yeah,
kind of like if you want to be in restaurants, show up and build that body of work. And we have to understand that even if you're a photographer with 15 years of experience, if I've never shot restaurants, I can't charge as much as somebody who's been shooting restaurants for 5 years.
right. And you're trying to build the trust in that new
You got to
lane,
build that trust. And if I have nothing to show you to say like, hey, you should hire me because I take beautiful food photos, even though I've never taken a food photo in my life,
except at a
it's
wedding,
it's a
maybe.
really hard sell. It's a really hard thing to convince somebody of. You have to build that trust and you have um, to work there. And so yeah, like there's so much industry knowledge that people repeat, and it's so smart. And also, it's like we have to balance the reality of where people are at and how
Yeah.
we get from point A to point B.
I think this goes back to your physics, right?
Hmm.
In theory, things sound really amazing,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
But in real life, sometimes that stuff doesn't actually pan out.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
how did you, at what point did you find that you could move away, that you were able to kind of replace the income you were doing from weddings? Or did you just slowly phase out like, okay, I was doing, like you said, 25 weddings and now maybe I'm doing 12 weddings. And then did you, pare down to just like a few to keep the coffer kind of full? Or was it like at some point you're like, okay, done with weddings, I'm on to this other thing?
Yeah, no, so I was shooting 25 weddings and a lot of that um was coming from advertising and outreach and just like general marketing. And I think that I've always understood business to consumer marketing better than I have business to business. And so I think I was able to sort of like put something together and put that out in the world. And most business consumer advertising, especially for weddings, is a lot more passive than it is active. I did pay for like Google AdWords and things like that, but so much of it at that time is when Facebook was huge and I was paying for Facebook ads, and they were really effective because
Yeah.
everybody was using Facebook heavily and very few wedding photographers were advertising on it. And now I would not pay for Facebook ads. Um, but it was like it was the right time and the right place to be in that moment, and it was really effective and it was really cheap. Um,
Yeah. And I love that you just said that. Like, I paid for advertising, right?
mhm.
I don't know how many photographers you have met in your time, in your 15 years, but I know so many photographers who are like, well, I wouldn't pay for that. Right. They
Sure.
try to do all this organic marketing, and some of it works, like for sure, like the meeting of the planners and things like that and the locations. But one is like investing in your marketing up front brought you work. Like it was a
100%.
good return.
100%.
And we're going to touch on this marketing conversation as we move through Ryan's story, because we're going to talk about how he's doing some marketing experiments right now. But
Yeah,
we'll just
absolutely.
foreshadow that for now.
Um, yeah, so where were we? So shooting food and then, getting editorial assignments for local magazines and at some point I made really good friends with a travel writer, like somebody who was trying to get into travel writing. And he was kind of like, "Hey, I've got this assignment in Salt Lake City covering, skiing and out by Park City and all these places. And there's budget, they've got budget for a photographer. Do you want to come with me? They're not going to pay you, but they'll give you, lodging and food. You like all you have to do is pay for your flight to get out there, and then everything's covered." And I was kind of like, "Yeah, let's do that." And so we just had a blast doing that. And then at some point later that year, he was like, "Hey, Visit Portugal is going to pay me to fly out, and they've got budget for a photographer. Same thing, but this time you don't have to cover your flights, but like any assignment fees that I get, I'll split with you if I use your photos." And I was like, "Great." And he was not making any money either. He was making like $100 an assignment. And so we went to Portugal and did all this stuff, and it was a huge hit. And Visit Portugal loved it, and all of these things kind of started happening. And it was so funny because I just fell over backwards into travel work. And at some point around the same time, I got flown to India to shoot a wedding, to shoot an Indian wedding. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be in India for a week, I might as well go for a month. And it was in
Sure.
December, which is, not a high wedding season. This is like still at the tail end of my wedding career. And so it was kind of like, okay, well, I'll go do that. And I'd made contact with the New York Times and they'd given me a freelance contract, but they had not assigned me any work. I didn't know how to get work from them at that time.
Hmm.
But I was like, okay, well, I want to shoot for the travel section. So I just started emailing the editor, the travel editor, and was like, "Hey, I'm on contract, but I haven't done an assignment with you guys. I'm going to be in India. I'll be there for a month. I'll be all over the place. Let me know if." And she's kind of like, "We don't have anything in India right now, but keep in touch. Let me know where you're at." And so every week I would send her an email with a couple photos that I'd shot, just sort of like walking around.
Yeah.
And at some
Like
point, she
you
was
get
like,
you.
"Hey, we have an assignment in Hyderabad, India. What would it take to get you there?" And it was like, "Nothing." What is it? And so at that time they were paying 450 for international assignments, and they were paying 250 a day for domestic inside the US. And so they flew me to, from Jaipur, I think, to Hyderabad, which to me at the time didn't mean anything. I was like, where is that? But yeah, I went to Hyderabad and I shot this travel story, and it ran, 9 images on the
Oh,
front
wow.
of the travel section. So it wasn't A1, but it was like front page of their travel section on a
That's
Sunday. And I was
big.
like, this is phenomenal. This is so cool. And at that point, I think this was 2015 or so. So it was like a huge boost to my confidence to say like, oh, I finally just got published in the New York Times, and they didn't just run one picture, they ran a full
Yeah.
feature, 9 photos, all these things, and it was amazing. And so that, all of those experiences kind of taught me like, oh, I love to travel. I already knew that, but traveling with a camera in my hand is like this huge confidence boost and this reason to sort of like explore a place and a culture and a people. And again, it was like it fit into this like deep need for me to sort of like understand the world and understand how things work. And for a long time, that was physics, and it was like, how do things mechanically work? And then it shifted, and then it was like, how do people work? How does the world work? You travel around, and things are so different in a place like India than they are here. And there's still so many similarities. And it's kind of like, well, what makes them different? What makes this culture different? What makes this culture the same? And so I started kind of like traveling with that in mind and just sort of trying to get deeper connections with people and have those kinds of conversations and photograph it and sort of find those emotional connections that are like, hey, we're all looking for the same thing, and we do things differently, but we're ultimately the same inside.
Searching for the same answer.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love the idea of, well, not even the idea. I love the fact that you knew that you were going to be in India, had found the right contact at New York Times, which
Mhm.
is like finding a needle in a haystack, by the way. Um,
Absolutely.
I mean, they have so many editors. So when you find the right one, like that's brilliant. But the fact that you were like, well, I'm here and I'm just going to kind of share my travels with them kind of like on a weekly
Hmm.
basis.
Hmm.
Um, one, because they opened the door and said, yes, like share where you're at. And I
Hmm.
think I know for me, like I have a hard time being like, well, I told you where I was going and I gave you my itinerary. I don't want to like really bug you. Right.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, so like I wrote you last week with like this information, and then I wrote you this week with like my itinerary. And it's like, well, do I really want to write you next week? And what I've learned, and as you learned through that story, is
Mhm.
like, no, no, no. Editorial moves really fast, especially if it's a daily. It
Yeah.
moves even faster if it's something like the New York Times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they actually mean it like if you are somewhere um to send them images. So like I literally what 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago was Wimbledon. So maybe about
Mm.
4 weeks ago, I wrote a pitch to the New York Times to do a food lifestyle story about Wimbledon, not about the tennis, but about what happens outside and around the tennis.
Love it.
And the same thing, it was like, oh, I wrote it and I saw that she opened it, but she didn't get back to me.
Hmm.
So then I was like, well, the tennis is coming.
Hmm.
And she had once said to me, like, this is our itinerary for when we pitch stories and when you could do it. So like I knew their pitch days happens on Wednesdays. So I sent it on
Hmm.
Tuesday, knowing that she would have it for Wednesday to pitch. I got an email
Where,
back right
where?
away saying, like, oh my God, this is actually something we just talked about. And it's
Yeah.
still kind of floating out there. And I thought, good job, Shelly. Like you remembered to follow up.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that follow up. And even though the assignment kind of got like didn't happen, but
Yeah.
it was like it had been considered, they had talked about it, and I now have the images from Wimbledon because I took my own initiative to go out and photograph it.
Hmm.
uh, and now I get to share it with the editor to be like, hey, like I know the story didn't happen, but here's some of the things I got, like a little bit of a mini gallery,
Totally.
and remind her that like I'm there and I'm interested in these things, and like the big cricket matches are coming and the Euro is coming for the women, and
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
all these stories that they might want, whether it's in France or Germany or London,
Yeah.
I'm there. And so I think like your story just is continuing to remind me, and hopefully everybody else out there, like you need to follow up.
You have to follow up. It is like the only way. I feel like follow up is king. It's just the
Right.
only way to make it work.
One
And
email
now
isn't
more
even
than
enough.
ever because nobody answers emails anymore.
Yeah, it's almost like we should go back to the phone.
Yeah.
It'd
Yeah.
be novel.
I've heard other photographers talk about like, oh yeah, I just started calling again. Like I just started calling the office and asking to talk to the person I want to talk to. And I'm like, that is terrifying to me. But that's literally how I started in like 2010, 2011 when I was like trying to do some of that stuff. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to call up the marketing manager at this company or something like that. And I wouldn't even know who it was. I used to call the front desk and be like, "Hey, I'm looking for the marketing department. Can you put me in touch with like who do I need to talk to?" And the person at the front desk would tell me their name, and they'd be like, "Yeah, I'll transfer your call."
You're
And
like,
that
great,
was
I
the
can't wait to
time
talk to
then.
Dan.
I don't know what it would be like now. If I actually called, do people even have front desks? Everyone works from home now. Like that was in the time when everyone had offices and showed up 5 days a week, and
Yeah, and you had an office manager who would answer
you had
phones.
somebody who would answer the phone and direct calls.
Mhm.
And that didn't really work at the time, but mostly because I just didn't have a portfolio, or it was just like too early in my career to be calling up some big magazine and talking to the photo editor and being like, hey, I'm Ryan Dearth. I take photos. You should hire me. um, but it did work a little bit. It was good networking, and I got contacts out of it, and I got a few meetings out of it, and at that time, that's what I needed. It was always disappointing when you didn't get work, but the reality is I was not ready. I was not ready to get that
Yeah.
type of the work that I was reaching for when I very, very first started. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to walk right into the New York Times, or I'm just going to walk right into Outside Magazine, or American Airlines or something. I don't even know, but like that's the sort of calls I was making, is stuff where after 15 years I'm still chasing that type of work. And it's like, oh, now I at least understand the process of like I have to build something to to show them.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So like the portfolio build, I think is a big piece of it. Where I think there's a few people who've been talking about this recently on social about building a portfolio, building for the work that you want, and then like refreshing your work, especially when you're in that pivot point, right? Like you
Hmm.
can't really show travel work. Like you could show some travel stuff that you could pull out of weddings,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, if you're at some amazing location, right? Like if you were like, oh, I'm shooting at like this chalet in the mountains, or I'm out in like Breckenridge or something like that, like you might get like one or two pretty shots, but then everybody's in like formal attire.
Yeah, in my experience, there were a couple times early on when I tried to pull some photos from my wedding work into my portfolio, and I remember having a portfolio meeting with 5280, which is a big lifestyle magazine here in Denver, and the photo editor kind of just like tearing
It's
me
like,
a
what's
new
that?
look.
What's that?
Like, is this from a wedding? And I mean, to some degree, that was, I thought, a little bit like out of line and a little bit rude, but also understandable in a way. Um, but it was like good feedback. And there's something about like, if it looks like a wedding, most commercial, like really qualified commercial buyers are probably not going to be interested.
Yeah,
And
they'll turn their nose up.
that was a really good lesson I learned early on that I still see young photographers make all the time, which is like you put together a website and you have, product work, and you have lifestyle work, and then you have weddings. And I'll tell you right now, don't put your wedding work on your commercial or editorial photography website. They are very different specializations, and it becomes very clear very quickly to a qualified buyer that's like, this person is not specialized in the way that I want them to be.
Yeah, the separation between consumer work and commercial work or brand work.
Yeah, and I will say there may be times where you could sneak photos across, but it's very rare. I found it very, very rare to make that work.
So your travel career sounds like amazing. You found a travel writer who is willing to take you along for some really cool early assignments. And then you really went like kind of like, dove into the pool of travel work for a while.
Yeah, I was pretty deep in the travel world, and I was getting assignments. It was like editorial travel. I don't like back then it didn't pay very well. It's got to pay worse now. Um,
Well, I do
uh,
know a lot of people who kind of like double or triple dip when they do the travel stuff, right? Like they'll do
and
it
that's
for an
the way that I made
assignment
it work.
as because you would do the assignment and then potentially have a brand deal or
Yeah, or I'd partner with honestly what ended up happening is a lot of the time I'd find places that I wanted to go and then I would pitch. I would pitch, big and small travel like editorial travel publications, and I would do a little bit of research and kind of like figure out what it was that I was trying to do. And I would pitch publications because that was sort of my main. It's like this is what I really want to be doing is sort of somewhere in this like documentary reportage world for editorial stuff and like telling stories about different places and different cultures. Um, and then if I would get any bites on that, or even if I didn't, then I would also pitch to different brands, and I would pitch to hotels and resorts and things like that. And it's just sort of like, well, if I can cover my flights there, like how can I make this affordable to just make this travel work? Because it was really like if I could get a magazine or a publication to hire me for a story, it might be like 350 bucks or 400 bucks or something like that. And if you're flying to Indonesia, that's $1,000 plane ticket easily.
yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll make 400 bucks off of this. Maybe I'll make $1,000. I don't know. But I would do a lot of that sort of thing, but it was almost like funding my personal project. It's like, oh, I want to go and see this island in Indonesia that has some, like particular culture, right? And so I'm gonna go there, whether I'm gonna get paid for it or not, and I'm gonna shoot these photos. And I'm like, this is an investment in my portfolio, but it also is just like, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I'm really interested in. I want to go and see these different cultures and immerse myself and understand what's going on and tell those stories. And so I just kind of figured out how to make it work. And I would pitch a lot of different things, and a lot of the time I would get responses that were either I wouldn't get a response or I'd get things like, "Cool, have a great trip. Let me see some photos when you get back." And it was like, that's really disappointing. But again, to speak to the follow-up, I would come back and say, like, here are the photos. And a number of times magazines bought a photo essay for $1,000 or $2,000 or $500, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, like, so if I can get this covered, I might be able to make some money on the back end and just sort of like make that work. And so I would wait until slower months and I would make it happen just because I wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, this talks back to like the whole restaurant thing that you were talking about with Eater, which is that whole like back end, right? You would get a little
Yeah,
bit of the front end, you would go do the thing, then the restaurant might pick it up. The same kind of idea with with the travel, much bigger expenses. Um,
sure.
but trying to like cover 80 to 90% of the fees up front. So you're not like going broke.
Yeah.
And then trying to like, like you said, do the follow up on the back end of like, here, I went to this place, I got these photos, here's the photos. And then they're like, wow, great, let's run a story on it.
Yeah. And so much of that works because I was passionate about it, you know?
Yeah. And you followed
Because
up.
I wanted to go to these places. I enjoy food and restaurants, and I like that industry and that part of life. Um, and to bring that back, it's like restaurants are where we make a lot of connections. We break bread with people. Uh, no, we can't talk about politics until everybody's fed. All of those things. So it speaks to this like human element of like why do we work the way that we do? And so, like that's like a little bit of a reach, but it sort of I can see those through lines in my work and my career about what I've been interested in and why I followed the things that I have.
Yeah. But now things are a little bit different. You're staying a little bit closer to home, not flying so far afield. Uh,
Yeah.
and what's the new shift? I don't want to give it away. I'll let you say.
Yeah, so pandemic shut down my travel, obviously. And then by the time that the world had sort of like reopened to doing some travel stuff, I was in a serious relationship and living with my girlfriend who's now my wife. And I just didn't have, it was not a priority or an interest of mine to be traveling as much. I wanted to stay closer to home and then also, having that taken away, I had to shift my business. And so I leaned a little bit more into kind of lifestyle work. And more recently, I've probably like 2 or 3 years ago, I kind of started transitioning into a lot of like outdoor lifestyle, wellness, active kind of stuff. And that's always been a bit of an interest of mine. But when you're shooting editorial work, you get jobs shooting athletes and you get jobs shooting chefs and you get jobs shooting CEOs and you get jobs shooting, like uh refugees and like every type of person, every walk of life, which is fantastic and phenomenal. But I had this really disorganized portfolio, and it was kind of all over the place. And it was like food and travel and active lifestyle and fashion and it was just like, okay, I'm like falling into this trap of if you are talking to everyone, you're really talking to no one. And so I wanted to really like cut down and say like, okay, well, I'm getting married. We're talking about starting a family. We're doing all these things. I should probably get maybe a little bit more serious about like the direction of my career and all of these things. And so I worked with a consultant to sort of like hone my portfolio, and I'd done that a few times over the course of my career. And like there's really great things, there's really bad things about working with consultants, but I really think that it was super helpful for me a number of times in my career to sort
I'm
of.
curious about this last consultancy because when you're looking at your work before, right? Like it was actually an advantage when pitching editorial to say like I can photograph anybody, I can be anywhere, I've been in every terrain,
Mhm,
I'm innately interested in culture and people.
mhm, mhm.
But when you're shifting and trying to get more into like brand work or commercial work, right? And you're
Yeah.
like, I want to have a cohesive story that fits within your values and who you are, which is still that interested in culture, interested in people, interested in land and how we utilize it.
Mhm.
Did the consultant help bring those values of your internal values to the forefront when looking at your portfolio, or were they really just like you brought those to the table to say, here's the things I value, help me build a portfolio that kind of integrates that?
Yeah, well, I went to and I'll tell you, I worked with Peter Denon at Pedro and Jackie. I don't know if you know him,
I
but
do.
yeah, I went to him with that in mind and kind of said like, hey, this is where I'm at. I feel like I'm in this trap of talking to everyone. And I do think that, one of the things that I worked on heavily throughout my career is finding a voice and finding a style. And I think that I still believe this, I think when you have a really strong voice, a really point of view, you can sort of point your camera at any topic or any subject or whatever and use your voice to explore that. And I think that's part of like lifestyle, right? It's like lifestyle is about people, but it's all, I mean, it can also be about shoes or clothes or a place or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
lifestyle is a really broad term, and some people use that as like, oh, I'm a lifestyle photographer, which means they're a family photographer. And like it's a really broad umbrella. And so that's what I was chasing for a very long time is this broad umbrella and building that into like editorial and commercial work and brand, like anything that I got, I sort of tried to like use my voice, which was a huge benefit to my brand over the long term. And in
Yeah.
the short term, it ended up just sort of being this really big umbrella. So I needed a little bit of help in directing that.
Yeah.
And so I went to Peter and kind of said, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm after. I want to be able to chase after, like it, like to your point, like I can send this to an editorial publication or to certain places and people would get it, but it didn't scream like high-end brand work. It didn't scream really high-end commercial work. Because it was all over the place, even though I'd done some high-end commercial
Yeah.
projects and some, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, we just talked about that a lot. And he had me send a whole bunch of images and we went through the whole kind of creative process about like, well, what works, what doesn't work, what do you want to show, what kind of work do you want to be getting, and he edited down a really great portfolio that took I think my website was like 800 images,
My
and
gosh.
now it's like 200 and 200, 250 or something like
Right. It's
that.
very curated and focused.
Yeah. And
Um,
so that was really helpful to have a third party's perspective. And I think at some point he even said, you know, when we as photographers, when we as artists look at our own work, we make all of these connections to it that are like, oh, I remember taking that shot and I'm so proud of what I overcame to get this photo, right?
yeah.
But from his perspective, he just sees a picture. And it's like,
Yeah.
is it a good picture or is it a bad picture? Is it like speaking what it, like is it achieving its goals? Is it not? Like, and he's making all these other connections. And he was sort of like, if those connections that you're making as a photographer are not being broadcast to the rest of the world. And so those in that one respect are bad connections. But
Interesting. Yeah.
when I look at this as a third party person who doesn't see it as your photo editors and as your creative, art buyers and all those people, like we make different connections and those are going to be good connections. So like I'm sure that we all get it. One of the things I always love to do is go back and re-edit work. And when I shoot personal work, if I go do a test shoot or anything like that, it's so hard for me to look at it the next day. It's like, oh, I don't even want it. Like the photos are so bad.
Bad.
They're so bad. And then, like a week later, it's a little bit easier. And then a month later, it's sort of like, oh, I actually liked
There's
a
like
lot of the
there's like one
photos
or
that
two
we
in there
got.
that I like. Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. And then, 2 years later, you might be like, that's so old. Or sometimes I look back at work from 15 years ago that there's like one or two shots from 15 years ago that are still in my portfolio, that are
Yeah.
still on my website. And I'm like, I love those photos. And to this day, when I'm looking for creative inspiration, I sometimes look at my website or at my book and things like that because to sort of remind myself, who am I? It's really easy to look at other photographers' work, and it's really good to look at other photographers' work and say, like, this is the type of work I want to be doing. And how do I build some of this in and take inspiration from that? And also, I think it's really important to look at your own work and say, like, what do I like about my work? Who am I? What do I have to say to build that point of view and continue putting that back into your work? Even if you're like, and sometimes 2 years later, I'll go back and re-edit, look at a project and it's kind of like maybe I'm putting together a treatment or a pitch or something like that. And it's kind of like, I feel like there's something in this shoot that maybe didn't make it to the final cut, but I'll go back and look through and I'm like, oh, I can see that there was some thought here. And I maybe in the edit, I missed it, because I was thinking about something over here, and now I'm looking over in this direction, and I'm like, oh, this is actually like this shot that I passed over is fantastic. And sometimes I'll
Right.
bring things back in that way. And having that distance and being less emotionally attached to your photos, I think is what allows for you to make those connections, right? Those good connections that are sort of like, is this achieving the goal that you're intending it to?
Yeah, I think your point to the personal connection is really hard because you know what you did to get to that point or what was going on in that environment or what the situation was like. But when the with someone else who wasn't there sees the photo, like they don't know, right? They didn't know that you had to climb, 10,000 feet and stand on this ledge and, you know,
Hmm.
you had less than 1% of your battery and this was like the final shot and like you nailed it, right?
Yeah.
And in your head you're like, oh my god, I did it, that's like the hero shot, like it's amazing. And it's like I went through all of this to get that photo, and you're just like, yes, that's making my portfolio. And then someone looks at it and they're like, why is that shot in your portfolio?
Yeah, totally.
And you're just like, but it's an amazing shot. And they're like,
Yeah, and you might
but
be
is it?
totally right, but it's like, does it belong in this collection?
Yeah, like is it,
Right?
is this the right spot for it? Is this the right time for it? Is it, like you said, is it achieving the goal that you need it to achieve to get to the next thing? Or is it something that you can be really proud of and you can put on social media and you can tell that back story about
Totally.
this shot, and that's where it needs to live, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an old journalist saying it's like you have to kill your babies. And
Yeah. You have to kill your baby.
leaving stuff on the cutting room floor is so hard. It's really a challenging thing, and it's so good for you to edit down your work and look at it. And it's like it's so hard to be objective
Right,
with
because
your
you're too
own
close to it. You're too close to your
work.
work.
And it's hard because all of this stuff is inherently subjective.
Right.
So it's hard to talk about objectivity in photography when it is an inherently subjective, art. Um, but there is, especially when you're talking about commercial photography, like there is an objective point of view, or at least some semblance of one.
Well, I think this brings us to the point of like where you are now with your work and how are you, right? It's not about finding photo editors so much. It's about finding those right connections. We were joking about, calling the front desk, getting the person's name to get to the marketing director, which is kind of the world you're back into now. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm
and
approaching a lot more brands and agencies. And yeah, the last 2 months or so, I've kind of started digging into LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn doing research and finding people that way for a while now. But I was active on Instagram. I was really active on Instagram for a long time, and then at some point in the pandemic, it got really kind of just like unhealthy, and I stopped enjoying it, and so I had to cut it down, and then I didn't want to be on there, and so I wasn't posting as much. And I think I can feel that. I think I felt that and can still feel that in my business. And it's hard to, like these sorts of things are so hard to pinpoint, oh, well, if I posted on Instagram once a day, would my business be way better or bigger, or would I be getting more inquiries? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it was kind of like I don't really want to spend time on Instagram, and
yeah,
I'll make it a point to go and post once in a while. But sometimes it's like once a month, or sometimes
yeah,
it'll be once every week, and then it might be 2 months before I post. And there's a lack of consistency there, which I think is problematic. And also, I just don't want to be there. And so there's that like inner conflict of like, what do I do about that? Um, And I think Instagram is becoming like a little bit less and less important for us. But I think it's still really
yeah.
important as
Well,
as
I
a
mean, I just want to
marketing.
hold up a little mirror to you,
Yeah.
and say, one, like if we get back to the core of the things that you love, which is people and connection and culture, right?
Hmm.
So if you, there's two thoughts that I have here on different sides of the coin.
Yeah. Lay it on me.
And one side of the coin, when we're specifically talking about Instagram, okay, it applies to LinkedIn too, but I'm really looking at it through the filter of Instagram, which is if you could think about approaching Instagram as that connection hub, that culture hub,
Hmm.
right? Like, why are we here?
Hmm.
Um, who am I talking to here? And it
Hmm.
may not necessarily be for you to find work, but it's a way for you to like check in on the art directors that you know, or check in on people like me, right? Like
Absolutely.
your colleagues and your friends who are like, hey, what's going on? And it might feel a little less of a lift if you're just posting on stories,
Yeah.
right? Because stories come and go, and if you don't like it, it disappears in 24 hours, right? It's like
Hmm. Hmm.
really, but then if you're like, wow, I posted that story about whatever it was, this hike I went on, or this cool restaurant I checked out downtown, or whatever. And you're like, wow, the one really fun thing about stories is like you get instant feedback. Like at the end of the day, like at that 23rd hour, you can actually see every single person who looked at it, right? Which you don't
Hmm.
get to see on your posts.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
you can see who's checking out your stuff, and you can see like, oh, look, there's this art director that I follow and this photo buyer that I follow. And like, oh, well, and Shelly checked out my stuff and this other friend checked out my stuff and this brand checked out my stuff. You can kind of be a little bit more of a sleuth, right? You can use this as
Mhm.
research to see who's looking at your stuff and also what's resonating with people. And if it ends up being like a series of stories, maybe it's 2, 3 slides, right? Where you're like, wow, that was really interesting. People like either they responded to the sticker or you had a higher count than normal. You can take
Sure.
those posts and you can take those slides and turn those into posts.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very strategic way of looking at it, and I love it.
Um, so that's one way to kind of just play because you're in this experiment mode with LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, how can you make it fun or more fun to like show up on a platform that you're like, I know people are there. And if
Hmm.
you're like, I'm kind of over the ick, if you're still in the ick, however,
It comes and goes.
then I would just say, like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I think that's
Let it go. Be like, if you want to get on there and see what other people are doing, or that like you want to connect or DM with people. But for me, like getting on Instagram is that I get to have conversations with people. Like I get to have DMs with you. I get to have DMs
Mhm.
with other people. I get to see what other people are up to. And I spend way more time looking at people's stories and commenting and connecting and just seeing where are people doing in the world? How are people feeling? And then I'm like, oh, I saw this post. Like I did a story post recently about getting really real about my mental capacity right now, my mindset, like not in a good place. And I could not believe how many people reached out to me just to be like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm sending you like good wishes. Like I hope things get better, or you need someone to talk to, like reach out. Like I had a series of DMs and it was like, oh, people are really paying attention to me. Like
Yeah.
they do see you, they are hearing you, they are paying attention. It was like kind of like a nice realization
Yeah.
where you don't necessarily like Facebook, obviously, like uh people are looking on Facebook and they'll like heart it, but no one really comments anymore. And mostly it's my family. So,
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, Facebook is just a different beast now.
yeah. But on the LinkedIn side of things, um, I'm very interested in about so you right, not spending time on Instagram, looking at LinkedIn to try to find the buyers and the people and the marketing directors and the brand folks that
Mhm.
are in those businesses. But above finding the people and maybe sending the connection notes,
Sure.
are you mining that data and like moving it to like a spreadsheet to be like, oh yeah, I followed up with Robert on this day and Michelle on that day? Or are you just kind
Yes.
of organically doing it and seeing where it goes?
No, I'm pretty structured with that. So yes, I do a fair amount of research on LinkedIn on, like who at the brand should I be talking to, who, and that sort of thing, and making connections based on the feed and all of that. But I'm really good I have a CRM, I use Nimble, and so I track all of that sort of thing. And So, I was using it. I was using LinkedIn for that, which is pretty understandable. I think that's how a lot of photographers use it.
Yeah.
And, in the feed, there's been like LinkedIn has gotten way more popular in the last, I don't know, year or two or three or something. And people are using it as a lot more long form posting to talk about stuff. And I got kind of interested in that. And so I've always struggled with, you know, writing and being confident as a writer and being not so much that, but like feeling like I have something to say in a written way. Like it's really easy for me to pick up a camera and go shoot a photo and share it. Like that is
Yeah.
no longer this like terrifying experience that it once was. Um, but it is terrifying for me to write a post that, is sort of like exploring some sort of value or idea or concept that we face in the industry. And I really appreciated that a lot of other people were doing that. And so I started doing that as well. And I think part of it is like this marketing effort to sort of stay on top of mind and I have this like network of people on LinkedIn that is, some to some degree like a captive audience, just like on Instagram or Facebook or any social media. But they're really like captured in our industry, right? And so there's an element of like, okay, how do I reach them? How do I stay on top of mind? Because we're all sending out emails and newsletters and I send out a lot of like direct outreach emails that's kind of like, hey, what's going on, here's some new work, whatever it is. And like 30, I send out 30 emails and maybe I get one response. And so there's a lot of we call it ghosting, but so often I don't think it's really ghosting. I think it's just people are reading it and being like, cool, I
Yeah.
don't have time to
Thanks, Ryan.
respond. Thanks. And you see that they read it or whatever, and it's kind of like, why didn't they write back? And it's really hard not to take it personally, but I don't think it's personal. 99.9% of the time. So yeah, it's kind of like, well, how can I do that? And then as I sort of worked through that, it's kind of like, well, it's helping to write this stuff and to think about these things critically. And I think it's helping me to sort of narrow my brand vision. And it's really helpful to like have some of these thoughts that I can explore and write out and get feedback on. And I try to be open to that and kind of say like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, let's have a conversation. I think that's where the value is. And it's pretty cool. I don't know, LinkedIn's algorithm is interesting because I get comments from all sorts of people who are not in my direct network on LinkedIn. And so,
Yeah. Because the minute someone likes your post in LinkedIn or say I comment on your post, then
Mhm.
everybody that is connected to me
Right,
sees that I comment on
sees
your
that.
post.
Right,
And so you might have someone from like, because my background is super varied, right? So you might get someone from my sports background
right.
that then sees your post and is like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, he's shooting outdoor stuff and here's his and like all of a sudden now you get somebody from, I don't know, they might be from the Lakers, right? That then
Mhm.
posts on your thing and you're like, who the heck is that? Like, I don't know that person.
Right.
And I think that's one of the cool things about LinkedIn is that the audience, the audience that you can reach, the ripple out effect is so much broader than what you could ever get on Instagram.
And it's just more, it tends to be more focused. But yeah, it's 100% more like broader, like you said, and more focused at the same time. And for some reason, it just feels a little bit more genuine. It feels like this community, it feels more community oriented. I think one of the things that that gives me the ick about Instagram is that it feels so insular. And it's kind of like, oh, I put this out here and then, maybe people like it and comment on it and we can have that kind of conversation. But it's so much just like scroll, scroll,
Yeah.
scroll, scroll, and like I think when I don't know, years ago, it felt better to be on there for me. It
I
feels
think
a
that,
little bit better right now because there's more community. Go on.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the one of the bigger differences between the two platforms is the conversations that are happening on LinkedIn are slanted towards business, right?
Hmm.
And so people are showing up with that in mind.
Hmm.
And so you're getting these conversations that it can be involving the various aspects of business. And
Hmm.
with that comes community and like authentic networking and people sharing real experiences that they've had, whether
Hmm.
it's in a similar industry or adjacent industries. But I think with Instagram, it's like you're not coming with a certain idea, right? It's like it could be for entertainment, it could be for work, it could be for,
Hmm.
you know, just to pass the time because you're bored.
Yeah.
And so like you're kind of coming there for a multitude of reasons, where with
Yeah.
LinkedIn, you're really coming with the idea of like, I'm here to see what people are up to and cheer people on and see what the business is doing and what is the industry doing and, you know,
Talk and learn and
talk and
listen
learn,
and
right? Like that's the first place that I learned about the WeTransfer change of terms,
same.
uh, or the CapCut change of terms was because of LinkedIn.
Yeah. 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 I
So
think that's a really good point. I feel like there's something about Instagram that makes me feel like I have to be entertaining and I'm like chasing followers in a way that I just, at least right now, I don't feel that on LinkedIn, which is a nice reprieve.
yeah, you're having conversations over there.
Yeah, it's nice to have conversations and be able to talk more directly about business. Threads has been kind of interesting too. I'm not posting on Threads, but I'll sort of like comment on things. But Threads, I don't know that I'm gonna start posting over there. It's it's a wild place.
It is a wild place. There is some, I find people kind of, a lot of the people that I know that are using threads are using it almost as like a beta test.
Mm,
So they'll put ideas out on threads to kind of have spur conversation and see like, does it land? Is it interesting? Should I take this piece of content and turn it into some kind of long form content somewhere else?
hmm. Hmm.
So I find that kind of an interesting playground, right? Like that could be
Yeah,
like a sandbox to play in with very little commitment.
that's true. Yeah.
So, well, Ryan, this has been really fun. I can't wait to hear more about what happens with LinkedIn as you move forward with it. Where can people find you online and keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on my website. It's ryandearth.com. And that also is my LinkedIn handle. And my Instagram handle is just my last name, Dearth, DEA, like Earth with a D or death with an R.
That's really funny. I've never thought of either of those.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm out there and I'm like really working to build community. Kind of everywhere that I go. I think the photo community has been really helpful for me in learning how to run a business and improving my photography and all of those things. So I've gotten so much from other photographers, either that I know personally or even the ones that I don't know who I've just met through, online. Um, so I'm really big on giving back, and occasionally will shoot me questions and things like that, and I'm always happy to talk about it and figure out what's right.
Well, if there was one thing that you would love to mind the community for right now, what would it be?
Ooh, to mine the community.
Like, is there a particular brand connection you're looking for? Is there a particular
Oh,
question you might have that you're looking to like brainstorm about? If there's someone you'd love to meet, like what would you ask?
Oh, I should probably have a better answer for this. People always ask me like, "Who's your dream client?" And I never have a really good answer, even though I've gone through those exercises a million times. But yeah, I mean, I love to connect with fellow people who are interested in telling stories and talking about their experience and talking about kind of like the emotional connection between people, and how we like achieve that through photography, because it's a really great way to do it, and it's also really challenging to do it well and to do it right. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. Well, we will build a campfire for that conversation.
Amazing.
Maybe we'll even do it in person. I'll come to Colorado and we can have some proper s'mores in the mountains.
Oh my God. We can definitely do a podcast over an actual campfire in the mountains.
I mean, it would be awesome. And we can invite a whole bunch of people and we can all sit around and have like live panel creative campfire.
That would be so cool. That would be so, so cool. I know
Uh,
a lot of people here who would be interested, so let's
oh
make it
my gosh.
happen.
Yes. I mean, there is a nice photo community in Colorado, and I know only a very, very small few of you.
Yeah, it's been blowing up a little bit recently. There's a lot of great talent out here. And I
Yeah.
think, as the industry changes, which is a challenging time for everyone, I think right now, there's like weird opportunities, and I think one of the things that's happening that I'm excited about. There's plenty of things that I'm not, but let's keep it to the excited part. I think that I'm excited that there's a lot of movement in the industry to look at different markets, and I think it's not, commercial photography is still heavily centered around LA and New York, but I think there's a lot of opportunity outside of there right now, which is pretty cool. You
I
don't
would
have
agree
to
with
be in
that.
New York or LA. Always had to be there, but
But I mean, I think to your point, one of the things that COVID did do was it opened up the eyes to people of smaller markets.
yeah,
And realizing that there is amazing talent in smaller markets and you can hone in on those people. One, they know the terrain, they know the local, area, they have local connections. You don't need to bring in all these people, which means your carbon footprint can be smaller. And if you care about planet Earth, like you can actually save some CO2.
yeah, absolutely, which I love.
Yeah. This has been super fun. There is so
So
much
much
more
fun.
I want to dive in with you, and we will have to do a part two because we were talking. For those, we're just going to drop this little juicy like teaser for sometime in the future. But we were going to talk about multiple streams of revenue and different ideas of how to do that. And we'll bring Ryan back, and we can dive into all things that he might be thinking about in that realm. And maybe we'll even bring in some other people. We can have a little mini panel discussion about what that looks like. Because I know some folks in one of my WhatsApp groups was just talking about like who sells prints and what do people think about the stock image market right now? Is it worth it? Is it not
Mhm,
worth it? Is
mhm.
Adobe still mining your information for AI? So lots of conversations to be had. But we'll save that one for the future.
Yeah, sorry, we got a little off track. It was good. I love tangents. It's maybe a little too much.
It's okay. I mean, there's lots of things to talk about. So we will come back to it.
Yeah,
Thank
sounds
you so
great.
much, Ryan. This was so awesome. And we will have round two in the near future.
Thanks, Shelley. It was great chatting.
Thanks for sitting around the campfire with Ryan and I. I'd love to know, would you be interested in a panel discussion on multiple revenue streams? And what are your thoughts on threads and LinkedIn for marketing your photography business or your creative business? Let me know by dropping me a DM over at Instagram, creativecamp.pro, or shoot me an email at hello@shelleywaldman.com. If you'd like to support the show, dropping a review or leaving a comment, which you can do on Spotify or YouTube, really helps others find us as well as join in the conversation. You can help keep us caffeinated by buying us a coffee, and the link to do that is in the show notes. We'll stoke the fire again real soon. Until then, keep creating, keep connecting, and we'll see you around the campfire next time.